China's State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang is on his first trip of 2021, visiting 5 African countries from Monday to Saturday. It's a tradition for Chinese foreign ministers to start their first overseas visit of the year to Africa for 31 consecutive years. What does the tradition say about China's commitment to developing ties with African countries, and what's the significance of this relationship in a post-pandemic world? Joining me today in Beijing is Zhang Jianping, Director of the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economy, and from Hong Kong via Skype is Professor Daya Thussu, Professor of International Communication at Hong Kong Baptist University. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. So it's a tradition, Professor Zhang, of 31 consecutive years, and it seems China wants to keep that tradition alive. Why not anywhere else again? Asia or Europe or America?
Actually, you know that between China and African countries, we have long-term friendship and brotherhood. Especially from Chinese side, we never forget supporting from African countries in order to be back to United Nations. Also, in recent years, between China and African countries, we have our ChinaAfrica Forum. Under that framework, between China and African countries, we have many fields cooperations in order to chase sustainable development. I think that between China and African countries, we have mutual respect and mutual interest in, especially as a globalization, in process of globalization and regional economic cooperation, two sides can seek more and more cooperation opportunities.
Well, in a most recent interview with CGTN, Wang highlighted the cooperation between China and African countries during the pandemic. Let's take a listen to this.
中方向非洲派出医疗专家组，建立医院对口合作，提供急需的抗疫物资，及时开展疫苗合作。中方援建的非洲疾控中心总部项目最近开工奠基，成为双方团结抗疫的历史见证。
So this is among other things. Basically, Wang Yi was talking about the cooperation China and Africa unfolded against the backdrop of a pandemic, such as the building of the African CDC, the provision of protection equipment, as well as cooperation in terms of vaccines. So, Daya, that's for your reference. Now, against the backdrop of the pandemic, what kind of significance do you think this trip has taken up for both sides?
Thank you for having me on your program.
Thank you.
See, Africa has always been important in Chinese foreign policy calculation. Even before the period of globalization, during the Cold War period too, the relationship that China has had with African countries, it was very well established, and not just politically but also economically. And China's support to various nationalist movement, anti-colonial movements are well recorded. Of course, in the age of globalization and global trade and liberalized global trade, of course, China is one of actually the biggest investor in Africa. And the countries where your foreign minister is going to visit are it's strategically and economically important. Nigeria, for instance, the largest populated country in Africa, a major energy resource-rich country. DRC is very important also in resource terms. Seychelles has geopolitical significance, especially in this debate about Indo-Pacific and the shift in thinking in the United States about the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific region more broadly. So, it has various dimensions, geopolitical as well as economic. And as you said, also a tradition that the foreign minister would travel to Africa, when it's going on for so many years. But it's not just a protocol visit in that sense. There are, I expect, serious political and economic issues to discuss.
But against the pandemic and its varying degrees of impact on countries, large and small, we're talking about major developed countries such as the United States and some countries in Europe being hit particularly hard, and China in a slightly better position to deal with the aftermath. How do you see the pandemic and the kind of situation we're living in now impacting China's relationship with African countries? Daya, once again.
Thank you. You see, if you were to look at the map of the COVID world, there's a very clear distinction between how the East Asian nations have dealt with this health emergency and how the Western world, and more specifically the United States, have dealt with it. The figures speak for themselves. So, China has done extremely well in terms of controlling this very, very serious pandemic. And so if you're, in a country in Africa or other parts of Asia or Latin America, and you have to make a comparison between which is a better approach, you are likely to look at China more seriously. And apart from that, there's also this whole discussion about the, vaccine. China has said very clearly from the very beginning almost that it's going to be for public good, which means that it would be distributed to countries where they need most, namely developing countries. So that's also a factor which will weigh heavily among governments in Africa and other developing countries. And if more broadly, if you think of COVID, its impact on international relations, it's like if you go back a little bit, 2008 was one of those years where people started talking about globalization differently, thinking that a certain model of globalization seems to have created problems for a lot of countries in terms of economic activity. And we saw the emergence of BRICS as a group of nations just after that. Similarly, COVID is, I think, it's very early to come to any kind of conclusive statement, but I think it is really making many people around the world think about the problems associated with certain kind of globalization, the dependency on certain countries, certain value chains, etc. And I think that's going to be a continuing discussion post-COVID.
Right. Professor Zhang, the visit of Wang Yi culminates with the 20th anniversary of the Forum on ChinaAfrica Cooperation, which is a flagship platform for China's cooperation with African countries. And during his trip, China and Africa countries are going to have a FOCAC meeting to prioritize issues of vaccine cooperation, economic recovery, and transformative development. So how do you look at the prospects of relationship of cooperation between the two sides from now onward, especially in the year 2021?
Yeah, if you look back, a relationship between China and Africa, I think that a very obvious character is that including, very effective development happened between two sides. Also, very high efficiency of development. Between China and Africa, we have systematic and comprehensive cooperation. Especially from Chinese side, we provided very valuable development experiences for African countries. That every year we provided a lot of capacity building courses for those high-level Africa officials. Some of them ask me if they can duplicate China's successful story and China's model. I just told them, actually, you can learn, experiences from Chinese side. That means by improving infrastructure and by promoting industrialization, and then you can create job opportunities and development capacity. So in this regard, I do believe that more and more African countries are willing to cooperate from Chinese side, especially right now facing with pandemic and global economic recession. many African countries realize that Chinese side, firstly, we successfully control the pandemic. Secondly, from Chinese side, we can provide enough capacity to support Africa, development, and we can provide, Chinese vaccine to African countries, medical supporting to African countries. Also, we have our 8 fields action plan between China and African countries under, 4 CAC. So that in the near future, we have more and more opportunities.
In the year 2021 is actually very special for Africa because there is a continental-wide free trade agreement, free trade area that's going into initiation on the first day of this year. So 54, I understand 54 economies on Africa have all signed up to it. That's a very, very significant development there. And then China's first free trade agreement with an African country, Mauritius, is also coming into effect on the first day, the same day of 2021. So, Daya, how do you look at the significance of all of these factors together?
Oh, this is a very big step happened in Africa.
Yeah, sorry, Daya first. Okay, Daya, 30 seconds, and then Mr. Zhang, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you. I think it is a reflection of what is happening elsewhere. We saw recently, in November last year, we saw the RCEP agreement, which is the most important global trade agreement with ASEAN, Australia, China, Japan. And more recently, in fact, last month, EU and China signed an investment agreement, which is very, very significant. So what's happening in Africa is a continuation of that, continent-wise, agreement, because Africa is going to be a very, very important market in coming decades. Also, it's a very resource-rich continent, and those resources have not been properly utilized for the development of African nations because of various reasons, including the colonial relationship that still exists in many shapes and forms.
Yeah, okay.
Especially in the Francophonie part of Africa, for example, where the French engagement is still very strong in terms of the way they control.
Yeah. I have to interrupt you, Daya. 20 seconds for Mr. Zhang, please.
Oh, yeah. Firstly, actually, China-Mauritius bilateral free trade agreement, that's a breakthrough between China and African countries for regional economic integration. We hope that more and more African countries can have this type of relationship with the Chinese side.
I have to leave it there. So sorry. Okay. No time left. Such a fascinating topic. Many thanks to Daya, Thussu, and Zhang Jianping.